The Battle of Chancellorsville, fought between May 1st and May 3rd of 1863, is perhaps the most stunning Confederate victory of the Civil War. The battle took place outside the Chancellorsville Mansion in Northern Virginia. The Confederates entered the battle under the leadership of General Robert E. Lee and Thomas Stonewall Jackson with nearly 65,000 men. The Union forces, under the leadership of newly appointed Joseph Hooker, nearly double that of the Confederacy, with 130,000 men. At the outset of the battle, it appeared as though Lee and Jackson would be overwhelmed by the superior Union numbers. However, after the first day of battle, the Confederates had held off the Union forces. The Union forces went into a defensive position and waited the following day, prompting Lee to take the largest gamble of the war by dividing his army in half. That night, May 1st, Lee sits down with Jackson and proposes his bold plan. Lee asks Jackson to take nearly two-thirds of the Confederate forces, nearly 25,000 men, to march 12 miles around to outflank the Union's western position. Jackson obliges Lee, and the next morning at 6 a.m. takes his 25,000 soldiers around to the western flank of Hooker's army. Hooker, however, doesn't think Lee would propose such a bold move and dispatches very few men to fortify the western front. That evening, Jackson and his men arrive on the western front, totally to the surprise of Union forces. They smash through the wilderness, easily overwhelming the few stationed Union soldiers. Most of the Union soldiers here were in the 11th Corps and were German, and as they were retreating, unfairly got nicknamed the Flying Dutchman. As Jackson continues to push in from the east, Hooker attempts to refortify the western front. By that evening it was getting dark, but Jackson wanted to press ahead that night. While out in the field doing reconnaissance work, he is accidentally shot by his own men. Jackson's left arm and right hand are both shot, forcing him to amputate his left arm and remove him from command of the battle. The following day, the Confederates continued to push the Union back through Chancellorsville. By day 3, Lee's big gamble had paid off. Jackson's soldiers were able to reunite with Lee's soldiers that had been split up. Hooker decides to abandon the high ground at Hazel Grove, therefore leaving this pristine artillery ground open for the Confederates. From this vantage point, the Confederates are able to take the lower ground at Fairview through brutal fighting with Union troops. At the end of the day, with Lee and Jackson's troops reunited, Hooker is pushed out of Chancellorsville and forced to retreat back north. Chancellorsville was a stunning victory for Robert E. Lee, who won here despite being greatly outnumbered. That victory, however, comes at a large cost, as Stonewall Jackson dies a week later from pneumonia, a huge blow to Robert E. Lee, as Jackson literally was his right-hand man. When all was said and done at the Battle of Chancellorsville, there were nearly 30,000 total casualties, 13,000 Confederates and 17,000 Union. Despite losing Jackson, this victory at Chancellorsville gives Lee the confidence to take his campaign north into Pennsylvania, and eventually to the major turning point battle of Gettysburg.